This is the solution for the basic configuration coding exercise, which is based on the production installation guide shown here, and can be found in the Tethys platform documentation. Once the system dependencies have been installed, there are a number of configuration steps that need to be performed. The first of these steps is to generate the Tethys portal configuration file. This file is the primary configuration file for Tethys platform, and as of version 3.0, you should no longer edit the settings.py file directly. Instead, add any Django settings that you need to define to the settings section of the portal configuration file. To generate the new portal configuration file, first activate your Conda environment if it's not active already, and then use the Tethys gen command to create the file. Notice that the location of the new file is included in the output. Also note that by default, the portal configuration file is generated in the Tethys home directory. Note this directory for later use in the tutorial. Go ahead and open the portal configuration file and inspect it. Notice this looks much like the example we saw in the documentation. However, the secret key is a unique key that is generated every time that the portal configuration file is created. This is the settings section that you would add any Django or Tethys settings to. The portal configuration file can be edited manually, or it can be configured using the Tethys settings command. We'll illustrate both as we set some of the required settings. There are two required settings that must be set properly for a production installation. The first of these is allowed hosts. The allowed host setting is used to specify a list of host or domain names that the Django site server can serve. If the domain name of your server is not included in this list, Django will refuse the connection. This is a security precaution to prevent HTTP host header attacks. The other setting is debug. Debug must be set to false in a production site. Never deploy a site to production with debug mode set to true. The debugging information that it displays whenever there's an error can include, and most likely will include, information that will make your site more vulnerable to attacks. Use the Tethys settings command to set the debug setting. Also, set the allowed host setting. Since we don't have a public domain name, you can just add this as the IP address that we noted earlier when we were setting up our SSH. Open the portal configuration file to inspect it and verify that everything is correct. Notice how the settings are automatically formatted to conform to the YAML convention. We ought to also add a few other hosts so that we can debug this locally, localhost and the IP address. This will allow us to debug it if we ever log on the server and open a browser using the GUI on the server. Remember, if your IP address ever changes, you will need to update the allowed host parameter to allow connections to your server again. Go ahead and close the file and save the changes.